Hey my glam girls, welcome back to my channel. It's Chelsea, where we talk about all things glam and all things girly. I'm a beauty enthusiast that loves to talk about everything dealing with beauty and makeup, and today we are doing the Eyeshadow Palette Tag Part 2. And I'm pretty confident I did not do Part 1. That's okay. We'll just jump right into Part 2. So this tag was created by Samantha March and Allie Gaines, and I will leave their videos down below so you can check them out. And also I will leave the different types of eyeshadow palette options or questions so that if you want to participate in it, you can. So this is going to be a fun video. Cannot wait to share with you my eyeshadow palette options and choices. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I truly do appreciate it, and let's get right into this video. So number 1 says all-time favorite eyeshadow palette, and if you know me, you already know what this is. Hold on, let me get myself together. Tom Ford's Nude Dip. This eyeshadow palette I would almost say, is going to be my all-time favorite forever. It is such a gorgeous formulation of an eyeshadow palette. The shades in here are like not anything that is like the most impressive, but you put them on your eyes and you get such beautiful looks. Every time I wear this eyeshadow palette, I get tons of compliments, and I literally just like slap on the shades and keep it moving. It is the most user-friendly, easiest eyeshadow palette to use, but then the payoff of the shadows is amazing. I love this wet dry formula from Tom Ford. Like, of all of my palettes, if I just have to choose one to travel with, Nude Dip is always gonna be in the mix. Now I do travel with more, but Nude Dip is always one that I'm bringing because it's perfection. Like, I personally believe that this palette is worth the whole $89. However, I did get mine from the cosmetic company store outlet, so I didn't pay that price, but I would pay the price for it because it's just that good. Second, new favorite palette, and this one was so easy, Pat McGrath X Bridgerton. If I have my choice of eyeshadow palette, I have been reaching for this one. I love everything about this palette. This one is now sold at Sephora as well as the Pat McGrath website. The formulation is amazing. The color choices is amazing. I started watching Bridgerton all over again, and I've gotten even more insight with the collaboration and the formulation of this palette. Like, I love everything about this whole entire collection. I have done a review on this palette, the highlighters and the blush palette, so if you'd like to take a look at that, I'll link that video for you. But this was a total win for me. Okay, third says keep for memories. I keep this palette for memories, but I also absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite neutral palettes, and this is the Sir John and Luminess eyeshadow palette. So this one came out in, I want to say 2018, 2019, and it came out when the Lion King movie came out, the one that has like the real, animals and things like that. And so this really caught my eye. Plus I love Sir John, so like I had to support him. But the eyeshadows are so beautiful. I mean, every one of these eyeshadows works phenomenally, like even to this day, even though it's a few years old. And because I love the shades so much, the matte shades, and then these pops of colors here are just stunning. So like, even when this palette gets like old and crusty, I will not throw it away until I see mold formation. I probably won't use it then, but I will keep it until I see actual mold growing on it. I love that palette, and like when I got it, I don't know, it was just a really good time as well. So like, just love it. Couldn't give it away even if I wanted to. So my most underrated palettes, I would say for me, would have to be my Lorac palettes, because I have not purchased a Lorac palette prior to like the end of last year in like over 4 years, and I wasn't looking for them, but they came out with the Fairy Tale palette, which I did do a review on this one, and oh, this one is so pretty, but the formulation really impressed me. And in that video, a lot of you all commented you have to try more. So I kept hearing you gotta try Lorac Noir, which I got, and I love this one as well. Like, such a beautiful smoky eye look and cooler toned eyeshadow palette. And then Lorac Soleil, and I was like, yeah, I can totally see why people love these palettes. I can completely see why these are just like good staple palettes, especially if you were to have all three. You got a cool tone palette, a warm tone palette, and then like a more fun type of palette. But what was really impressive to me was the formulation of them and they're $35, so you're getting really good formulated eyeshadows for a price that's not breaking the bank compared to other eyeshadow palettes, especially ones that we'll talk about today. But like completely impressed with the formulation, and so now Lorac is on my radar as when they come out with a new eyeshadow palette, I personally want to try them because those three have just been so good. Next, we have not a favorite, but can't get rid of. And I would have to give this one to Natasha Denona Tropic Palette. So this palette is definitely not her best formulated eyeshadow palette, but the colors in these are so pretty. And every time I look at it, I'm like, this is such a great palette for the spring and summer. And that's when I pull this palette out. So it's not like every, formula in this palette is bad. The shimmers are actually very impressive, very high shine, very pigmented. But some of these matte shades are just a little lackluster. Not so much in they're hard to blend, but they're just not overly pigmented. So even for my complexion, some of these don't really show up too well. So I have to like continue to build and build and build to get the matte shades to show up to where I feel like you can see them. So that's why I'm like, it's not, my most favorite, but I will never get rid of it. Number one, I am a collector of Natasha's palettes. And then number two, I really do love like the layout, the color story. I just wish the matte shades were just a little more pigmented and, that it showed up better on me. Favorite collab, and I most definitely am giving this one to our dear Mel Thompson and Sydney Grace. So this is her Tiny Marvels palette, and I would say this palette, she did an amazing job on the formulation of this palette, but also the creativity of it. So Mel loved everything dealing with insects and critters, and she really wanted that to be displayed in not only the artistry of this palette, but then also the colors that she chose. And even with that, she still chose a color story that was so cohesive, one that I most definitely, like, this is my perfect go-to spring eyeshadow palette, spring, summer. I use this one a lot in the spring and the summer because of the shades, but you can also use this one for the most part all year round too, because you can mix and match some of these deeper, cooler tone shades that I tend to wear more so in the fall and in the winter. So I love this palette. I so wish she was still here with us, but I'm so glad that Sydney Grace did bring this palette back so that if you weren't able to get it when she first came out with it, you could still get it now. And all of the proceeds from this palette do go to her family. So I thought that was great that they decided to do that in her honor. Okay, 2021 favorite. And you guys know, if you know me, you already know what eyeshadow palette I'm gonna choose. I am gonna show two because these two are just, they're technically at the number one spot together, but for different reasons. So the first one being Danessa Myricks, I know, Lightworks 3 palette. I mean, whole review, I was just oohing and ahhing and like gasping and going overboard and being the most dramatic over this palette, but I absolutely love this palette. I love like all of the duochromes, the metallics, the cream shades, just all of the things I love about this palette. This was the only palette in 2021 that actually left me speechless, like mouth open. I don't have words. Like I literally said, I don't have words in the video when I created my first looks with this palette. Danessa killed it and I love it. But the other palette that I have to give the number one spot to is going to be Pat McGrath's Celestial Odyssey palette. I'm not even gonna spend too much time on it because this is like the palette of the year for any type of look, for any event, simple, dramatic, evening, out with the girls, work appropriate, like the list goes on. Like this is your everyday, all occasion type of palette. And I love the formulation. The mattes blend beautifully. They're high shine, well not high shine, but highly pigmented. I mean, the list goes on every good thing that this palette is. So these two definitely have to get the spot for like best palettes of 2021. But like I said, for different reasons, because they are two completely different eyeshadow palettes. But like I could not just solely give it to one of them. Okay, then it's a didn't expect to love. And this, oh, it was a no-brainer as well. Natasha Denona Viva palette. Now this palette did not come out in 2021, obviously, but I got it last year. And I was like, you know what? I've been wanting to try Biba, let me just see, you know, what the hype is about, because I know this was a favorite of everybody's, especially when it first came out. I used this palette so much. It's still sitting in my like go-to drawer, because I will still reach for this palette when I'm like, I just need like a really, you know, nice bronzy neutral type of look. This is the first palette that I'm gonna reach for. Everything about this palette is so phenomenal. I love the layout of the eyeshadows. I love the tones in it. I love that we have warmer tones and cooler tones. The formulation is spectacular. Like, I do think this is one of her best formulated eyeshadow palettes. And like I said, it's one of those that I'm like, I'm traveling, this one has come. This one and Nude Dip are like now travel buddies. Anywhere I go, they're both going. It's just like, it has become a staple in my collection. And I think, I was completely blown away by how much I love this palette and how much I reached for it, even when I had other options of like neutral palettes to choose from. I was still reaching for this one. So yeah, complete and utter surprise, but that's, Biba is my heart, like one of my hearts, because you know I have a lot of hearts when it comes to my makeup. Okay, we have a palette that sparks joy, and I had to give this one to Mother and Utopian Dream. I mean, is she not a dream? Is she not a dream? Do you not open up this palette and go like, hey hun? That's what I do. It brings me so much joy. I love the tones in this palette. I love that I can use these two shades as blushes, so then this also becomes a face palette for me. I can use this shade as a highlighter. This one, if I wanted to, I could pull this one off as a bronzer if I wanted to. And then of course, we've got these special shades, this triple chrome, trio chrome. Everything in this palette is stunning. These two shades right here have to be my favorite in the palette. Like, I can't get enough of those shades. And yeah, like this one still sits in my go-to drawer, like, you know, my drawer that of eyeshadow palettes that I want to reach for more often. And yeah, I love everything about this one. I'm like, come on, Mother. You know, Mothership 10 is gonna have to bring it, because Motherships 1 through 9 have brought it. Can you imagine? Like, I feel like the build up to Mothership 10 is going to just be, like none other. I cannot wait for Mothership 10. I hope it comes out this year, but I feel like Mothership 10 is gonna be the one. I feel like Mothership 10 is going to be like Mothership 5, Bronze Seduction. Like that's when I became aware of like Pat McGrath and who like this makeup brand was. Like, it was through that palette. I feel like Mothership 10 is gonna be the same. So I can't wait for Mothership 10. All right, then we have newest palette in my collection, and it's actually what I'm wearing on my eyes. So Sydney Grace came out with their Be Mine eyeshadow palette. I did upload reels creating eye looks with both of them. So we have a lighter palette, which is on this eye, and then a deeper palette, which is on this eye. So I'll give you an up close view of it. So this is the lighter palette. I love the shades in this particular palette, and the mattes blend like a dream. The shimmers are just out of this world. Like, Sydney Grace has never created an eyeshadow palette where the formulation was just even remotely mediocre. So I knew the formulation was gonna be good, and it is good. So what I love about this palette is that the differences between the light and the deep palette are quite subtle, and it's subtle enough to where you almost can't see a difference, but then when you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, yes, there are differences. I also love that for the shades that could work for light and deep complexions, they left them the same. So here's a closer look at the deeper eyeshadow palette. And then when you look at both of them together, let me see if I can get them up. See if I can get them, here we go. When you look at them together, so this is going to be the deeper palette, and then this is going to be the lighter one. The top two rows are going to be the rows where the shadows are going to be different. So if you look at the top row here for the deeper palette, you'll notice that the variations are just slightly different for the top row of the lighter palette, which is here. And then if you look at that second row, which is right here of the deeper palette, the variations for the lighter palette, just slightly different. And so then when you look at my eye looks, you can see the slight difference of the tones, and I used primarily the middle shades for these eye looks. So I love that, like, that the brand decided to create two eye palettes that were basically the same. They just tweaked the tones, because I hate, and I've said this before, I hate when a brand comes out with palettes for lighter and deeper, and for the lighter palette and the deeper palettes, the color schemes are totally different. Because I've had palettes where I'm like, man, I like the color scheme of the lighter palette. Why couldn't they have just made that same color scheme just with different tones? So I love that Sydney Grace did it with these palettes. They are available now. They retail for $52, and you can get them on Sydney Grace's website. So happy to have these. Can't wait to create more looks with these palettes. And what I also like about them is that even though they are Valentine's Day inspired palettes, these are not just solely, you know, Valentine's Day colors. Like, you have this whole deep row right here that can give you those like intense and dramatic smoky looks. You can also create, of course, like everyday lighter looks with this palette that don't have to do anything with pink, but then you've got that middle row that like gives it that Valentine's inspired type of feel. So love, love, love these palettes. And then lastly, the first palette that I used in 2022 goes to Charlotte Tilbury's The Instant Look of Love in the shade Pretty Blushed Beauty. So I used the eyeshadows in this particular face palette for the first look that I created this year. Because I said in my declutter video, when I was decluttering my blushes, bronzers, and highlighters, I was like, I really want to use these types of face palettes more because the formulation is good and I just don't reach for them as often as I should. So yeah, the first palette that I used in terms of eyeshadows were these three right here. I did a haul video, and that was my first video of the year. So guys, this was so fun. I kind of want to go back and do part 1. Would that be kind of like not a good idea? You all let me know, because I did look up the questions from part 1 and I was like, oh, those seem fun. So leave down in the comment section below if you would like for me to do the eyeshadow tag part 1, even though that came out last year. But I would love to do that for you all. And leave down some of like your answers to these questions, like what was your favorite from last year? What palette is, you know, like not your most favorite but you can't get rid of? What palette do you think is underrated? I want to hear that, because those are the palettes that I might want to check out, what you feel are underrated and that are just amazing palettes. Leave that all down in the comment section below. And if you've made it to this point in the video and you have yet to subscribe to my channel, I would love for you to consider subscribing and joining the Glam Girl Squad. And guys, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in my very next video. Bye guys.